What if your deepest pain was not just a wound, but also your greatest teacher? Arthur Schopenhauer believed that suffering is not an accident of life, it is its very core. He argued that pleasure is fleeting, fragile, and shallow, while pain leaves deep marks on the human soul. Pleasure comes and goes like a passing breeze, but suffering imprints itself into memory, shaping who we are and how we see the world. For him, suffering was not only inevitable, it was instructive. It forced us to see life clearly, stripped of illusion. Think of the moments that truly transformed you. Were they times of ease or times of hardship? Few are changed by comfort. It is suffering that awakens us. A heartbreak teaches us that love is fragile. Illness reminds us of the body's limits. The death of someone dear shows us the impermanence of everything we cling to. These moments are painful, but they strip away the false promise that life was ever meant to be stable. They force us to confront reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. In this confrontation, wisdom begins. Schopenhauer described pleasure as negative in nature. It is not something gained, but merely the temporary relief of a prior discomfort. Hunger is relieved by eating, thirst quenched by drinking, ambition eased by achievement. But the relief is always brief. Hunger returns, thirst reappears, ambition grows stronger. Pleasure is a pause in the storm, not the end of it. Pain, by contrast, is positive. It does not vanish when one desire fades into another. It persists, it carves, it teaches. The sting of humiliation lasts longer than the joy of praise. The ache of grief endures beyond the fleeting thrill of triumph. Pain is a teacher precisely because it lingers. Yet Schopenhauer did not glorify suffering. He did not claim that pain is good or that we should seek it. He only insisted that it is unavoidable, woven into the very fabric of existence. To deny this is to live in constant frustration. To resist pain is to multiply it, adding resentment to what was already inevitable. Acceptance, by contrast, allows us to learn from it. To embrace suffering is not to wish for it, but to recognize it as part of life's price. It is the toll for being conscious, for existing as beings bound by the restless will. This recognition shifts how we live. Instead of fleeing from pain at all costs, we begin to see it as a guide. Pain shows us what matters, what cannot last, and where our illusions deceive us. A life without suffering would also be a life without depth. Joy would be shallow without the shadow of loss. Success would be meaningless without the memory of failure. Love would not move us as deeply without the risk of heartbreak. Suffering does not merely coexist with meaning, it creates the conditions for it. Schopenhauer also saw suffering as the foundation of compassion. Only when we acknowledge our own pain do we recognize it in others. Shared suffering is the ground of human connection. It humbles us, stripping away arrogance. It softens our judgment, making cruelty harder. Pleasure isolates because it is fleeting and personal. But suffering unites because it is universal. Every human being, no matter their wealth, status, or strength, will know loss, grief, disappointment, and pain. To know suffering is to belong to humanity. In compassion, we see that our struggles are not unique but shared. And here lies the paradox: suffering, which seems only destructive, contains within it the seed of meaning. It wounds us, yes, but it also awakens us. It tears apart illusions, but it leaves behind clarity. It humbles us, but it also makes us capable of kindness. Through suffering, we see truths that comfort could never reveal. We learn that life is fragile, fleeting, and beyond our control, and this recognition can lead not to despair, but to a deeper, more honest way of living. Schopenhauer's bleak vision was not meant to drown us in hopelessness. It was meant to free us from illusion. By recognizing suffering as the heart of existence, we stop chasing happiness as if it could be permanent. Instead, we begin to live more authentically, appreciating the fleeting joys that do come, while no longer being destroyed when they fade. In this way, suffering becomes less a curse than a teacher, a painful but powerful guide that shows us how to live with honesty, humility, and compassion. If suffering is the teacher, then what lessons does it leave us with once the first sting has passed? Schopenhauer believed that the value of pain lies not in the wound itself but in the transformation it creates. Pleasure distracts us, comforts us, but rarely changes us. Pain, on the other hand, presses us into new shapes. It forces us to confront what we avoid, to grow in ways we never would if life stayed easy. Think of resilience. No one becomes strong by floating on calm seas. Strength is born in storms. A person who has endured loss, disappointment, or illness carries a depth that cannot be faked. They understand fragility, and because of that, they endure more wisely. Schopenhauer saw resilience as one of suffering's greatest gifts, the ability to face life's hardships with fewer illusions and more clarity. Each wound strips away naivety, and each scar is a reminder that we have already survived what once seemed impossible. Suffering also teaches humility. Pleasure encourages pride. It convinces us that we are masters of fate, that success is proof of virtue, that happiness is deserved. Pain shatters that illusion. It reminds us that we are fragile beings subject to forces beyond control. This humility is not weakness, it is liberation. The proud cling to illusions, but the humble walk closer to truth. And in truth, there is freedom, the freedom of no longer expecting life to obey our will. Another lesson is empathy. To suffer is to know vulnerability, and in that recognition, we become more capable of compassion. Schopenhauer argued that compassion is the highest moral truth precisely because it arises from shared suffering. When we see another's pain, we know it intimately, we have felt something like it ourselves. This recognition dissolves the walls that envy and pride build. It makes cruelty harder and kindness easier. Through suffering, we remember that no one is exempt, that beneath all differences, we are bound by the same fragile condition. But suffering does not only connect us to others, it also deepens our connection to ourselves. In comfort, it is easy to avoid the darker corners of our minds. We distract ourselves with noise, with desire, with the endless pursuit of more. Pain strips those distractions away. In grief or hardship, silence falls, and in that silence we hear the questions we once ignored. Who am I without my roles, my possessions, my status? What truly matters when comfort disappears? Suffering forces us into this confrontation, and while it is painful, it is also clarifying. Schopenhauer also believed that art gains its power from suffering. The greatest works are not born of ease, but of struggle. Music, poetry, painting, these are attempts to give voice to what wounds the soul. And when we encounter art, we do not escape our suffering, we recognize it. We hear our own pain echoed in the notes of a symphony, we see it reflected in the brushstrokes of a painting, we feel it expressed in words we could not find ourselves. Art transforms private pain into shared beauty, making us feel less alone. In this way, suffering becomes more than endurance, it becomes creation. It inspires reflection, compassion, and expression. It reshapes our values, reminding us that what lasts is not comfort, but character. The pleasures of yesterday fade, but the lessons of suffering stay. To live with Schopenhauer's clarity is to see that pain is not merely something to survive, but something that teaches. It teaches us resilience, humility, empathy, self-knowledge, and creativity. And through these lessons, life, though never free from suffering, becomes deeper, more honest, and strangely more beautiful. If suffering teaches resilience, humility, and compassion, then what is its final gift? For Schopenhauer, the deepest lesson of pain is not merely endurance but wisdom. To live is to suffer, and to understand this truth is to stop expecting life to be something it is not. Suffering strips away illusions, and in the ruins of those illusions, a new kind of peace emerges. It is not the peace of a life without hardship that does not exist, but the peace of seeing life clearly, of no longer being deceived by the false promises of endless happiness. This wisdom begins with acceptance. Most people live in resistance, struggling against the inevitability of pain. They demand answers. Why me? Why now? Why this? But suffering is not personal, it is woven into the fabric of existence itself. Schopenhauer believed that once we accept this, we are free from the bitterness that comes from expecting life to be fair. Acceptance does not erase pain, but it softens it. It removes the second wound, the wound of believing we have been singled out. We suffer, yes, but so does everyone. To accept this is to walk with humility, and in humility, we find balance. From acceptance flows gratitude. It may seem strange to speak of gratitude in the face of suffering, but it is precisely because pain is inevitable that moments of joy become so precious. A smile from a stranger, a quiet morning, the warmth of friendship, these do not erase suffering, but they shine brighter because of it. Without the contrast of pain, we would take them for granted. Gratitude turns fragile moments into treasures. It allows us to see beauty where before we saw only lack. And this shift is itself a form of freedom. Suffering also deepens our relationship with time. Pleasure makes us impatient, always rushing toward the next thrill. Pain slows us down. It forces us to dwell, to reflect, to notice. Schopenhauer believed that suffering grounds us in reality in a way pleasure cannot. It makes us present. In grief, we feel every second. In loss, we measure every memory. Pain roots us in the moment because it cannot be ignored. And while this presence is sharp and sometimes unbearable, it is also authentic. It brings us closer to the truth of being alive. Art, again, carries this truth forward. The greatest works of human creativity are not monuments to pleasure but testimonies to suffering. They endure because they speak to something universal. When we read a poem written centuries ago and feel our own pain reflected in it, we realize that suffering is the thread that binds humanity across time. Through art, suffering becomes shared, and in that sharing, it loses some of its sting. We are no longer alone. We belong to a chorus of voices that have endured, learned, and created despite pain. Finally, suffering offers the gift of perspective. It reveals what truly matters. Much of what we chase, status, possessions, recognition, loses its urgency in the face of pain. Illness shows us the value of health. Loss shows us the value of love. Hardship shows us the value of endurance. Suffering clears away distractions and forces us to reorder our priorities. It reminds us that life is not measured by how much we accumulate but by how deeply we live, how honestly we face our struggles, and how kindly we treat others along the way. Schopenhauer's philosophy is often called bleak, but in truth, it points toward liberation. By accepting suffering as the essence of life, we stop running from it and start learning from it. We stop demanding permanence and start valuing the fleeting. We stop comparing ourselves to illusions and begin to see clearly. The gift of suffering is not happiness, but wisdom. And wisdom, unlike pleasure, endures. So perhaps the question is not how to avoid suffering, but how to meet it. Will you resist it, curse it, deny it, or will you allow it to teach you? For in every wound lies a lesson, and in every lesson lies a chance for freedom. Schopenhauer's message echoes still. Pain is inevitable, but within it lives the possibility of truth. To suffer is to learn. To learn is to grow. And to grow is to live more deeply than comfort alone could ever allow.